So Genesis chapter 38. Genesis chapter 38. So last week we looked at Genesis chapter 37 and we saw Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers for 20 pieces of silver. Joseph's brothers, they had grabbed him. They were out on their own. They got away from their brother and then they see him coming and they're like, oh, here comes the dreamer again. He's going to come and tell us about how we're going to serve him. Oh, this guy drives me nuts. Can't stand him. And so they plot to kill him. And then one of the brothers pipes up and says, no, Reuben says, hey, let's just throw him in a pit. Let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in a pit and then think about it for a while. So they throw him in a pit and they go and have lunch. And they're all in there and having lunch and he's in there crying. And then Judah doesn't know that Reuben has a plan to sneak Joseph off and take him back to his dad. And Judah sees that the brothers are finishing up their meal and he's thinking, oh, they're going to go after Joseph now. And so he says, hey guys, there's a Midian Canaanite traders coming, Ishmaelites. Let's grab them and we'll sell Joseph, and then his blood isn't on our hands. So this is a good deal. And so he's thinking, I'm saving my brother. So he sells him into slavery, and now Joseph is off, heading on his way to Egypt. And so we saw this, how sin and envy and pride can make a man do horrible things when we allow it to take over, when we allow it to control our lives. So this morning when we dive into chapter 38, we're going to see the story kind of stops for a second and turns its view. The rest of the book is mostly focused on Joseph's life. But here in chapter 38, we turn our view and we're going to be looking at Judah. This is our only real glimpse into what is going on while Joseph is in Egypt. And it's not a good glimpse. This is another one of those chapters we could say, this is proof that this isn't written by man. Because who, writing your family story, picks out the worst and puts a whole chapter to it? Because we know that there's huge sections of like 10 years where there's just no comment. They just went about their business. It doesn't describe everything that went on. We're not going to know what happens with all these brothers, why Joseph's in Egypt, because we're going to be learning about Joseph. But here we see in chapter 38, they stop and they let us know what's going on back at home with Judah and his life. And we're going to see that it's not that great. And it gives us an illustration that God is inspiring these words to be spoken so that we can learn from them, we can grow. So when we take a look here, we're going to see this story. This chapter really shows us the grace of God. I'd say of any chapters, this chapter really shows us the grace of God. Just like the chapters before when we saw Simeon and Levi attacking the people of Shechem and killing all those men, we see here that God's grace is moving and working even when we make horrible mistakes. God's plan will work in spite of us. He'll just keep working. He has a plan. He has a work. And that's the thing that's so amazing, and it blesses us. So chapter 38, verse 1, it says, and it came to pass that at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hiram. And Judah saw there a daughter of the certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. So Judah here gets away. He gets away from his family, and you can understand why. They've just sold their brother into slavery. He had to look his father with all his brothers in the face and say, oh, you don't know what happened to him. Here's his bloody garment. He probably got eaten by animals. And so Judah's just like, you know what? I can't do this. I got to get away. I can't be looking at dad every day. I can't even look at my brothers every day. I just got to get away. And so for some reason here, Judah leaves and he heads on out. And he marries this Canaanite woman. And it says, so she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name So here he has his son, and he calls her name Now, Judah's probably not the guy you want naming your children. He's just like, you know what? This is really hard. Let's just pick one easy. How about How's that spelled? E-R. Should be good. Then I don't have to remember how it's spelled. I don't have to be confused. You know? It's way easier. And so he just gives his first child's name, and he gives it So she conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. So she says, you know what, Judah? I'll take it from here. you're not good with names. I'll pick a different name. So she has the second son and names him Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son and called his name Shelah. He was at Shebez when she bore him. We can see the separation in this story right away. Judah has his first son and he names it but then when his second son comes along, his wife takes over and begins naming the children. Judah's not taking his proper place in his family. We have to remember that his wife that he is now married is a Canaanite. She worships the Canaanite gods. She's into all kinds of pagan practices and things. And he is allowing her to run the house. He's not saying, hey, this is how we're going to do things. He's allowing her to run the house. And so she takes over with the naming of the children. And we're going to see that that ends up becoming a very bad thing. Verse 6, it says, and Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Now, when we're reading the scripture, we have to remember that between verses, years can go by. He didn't just have a kid, and he's 3 years old, and the other kids are running around and goes, it's about time to get married, young man. You're growing up. You're responsible. He's like, nah, nah, nah. It's like, no. Years have gone by. Now his son is grown up, and he's like, okay, I got to find a wife. And so he finds a wife. Now, I really like how this works. The dad just goes out and finds a wife for his son. I've been really impressing this upon the boys, that this is a good system. And I think it should be brought back. No? I'm sure I could find a really nice girl that has teeth and maybe has hair. I probably could find a great deal, if you look around hard enough. Anyways, I think this would be fun. Oh man, it would be fun torturing your kids if this was still the system. You'd be like, hey, I'm going to go pick your wife. Walk into town. Well, how about that one? It's like, Dad, please, no. No, stop it. And every time, can you imagine that? Ladies, every time your dad was talking to someone and he had sons, you'd be like, oh, they're making a deal, and I can't stand him. It's like, oh, no. Why are they chumming up? Why are they going out for coffee? What is this all about? Oh, no. Oh, you'd have your eyes on, Mr. Handsome or whatever that you fell in love with in high school, and your dad's off talking to some guy who's a pig farmer, and you're like, oh, I don't want to marry a pig farmer. But here we see he finds this girl Tamar, and they get married. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. That's a scary passage, a scary verse right there. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. Notice it doesn't tell us how he was wicked. He was just wicked. You know what? A lot of people are wicked in the scriptures, and God doesn't just take them out. But God took out because he was raised mostly by his mother, and he had been taught things that he shouldn't have been taught, and he was wicked. He was wicked. Because you look at his dad and you say, his dad's pretty messed up. His dad's family's pretty messed up, and this kid is messed up. So God takes him out. And then it says, and Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. Oh, I'm glad that these rules don't apply today. Your brother goes off and gets married to this girl, and you're like, hey, great. You know what it's, I know some of you guys know what it's like. I remember sitting there at my brother's weddings going, whoop-de-doo, I don't know why you're marrying her. I don't like her anyways, but whatever. And you have to go to these weddings and dress up and put on a tie and go do photos, and I remember just being like, okay. Both of my older brothers got married in the same summer. It was just like wedding. It's like, oh my goodness. And so, but here in this tradition, the tradition was if the older brother gets married and then he passes away and the wife, the widow, doesn't have any children, then it's your responsibility to step up and marry her. And most of us can say, I like my sister-in-laws, but no thank you. I'd be like, no, please. This was the tradition, is you would go in and so that to honor her, so that she would have children, and so your brother's name would continue on. Because that first child and those children would be under your brother's name to pass on his legacy. It was to honor and respect your brother. But it would have been, I think, a difficult thing to do. And so we run into this. This is we'll see this later on as we get into Ruth and others, because it becomes part of the law. It's the kinsman redeemer. It's a kinsman. A family is there to redeem. Redeem that family name. Redeem that person that's going to be left out of the family. And it was an important thing to do. And if the brother dies, and it was your responsibility to take this woman to be your wife, and you chose not to, you would have to go before the city gates. And this is a weird tradition, but it means a lot to them. You had to go into the city gates before all the judges of the elders of the city. You take your sandal off before this woman and hand it to her. One sandal, just one. And then she would spit in your face. You'd basically say, I don't want you. She would spit in your face in public in front of everybody. Now, to us, we go, oh, it's kind of... You'd be like, yeah, no problem. Here's my sandal. I'll go get another one. But to spit in someone's face, now, that's bad here. But in the Middle East, that is bad. That's absolute disgrace. And to be disgraced, basically say, look, I've only got one sandal, hobbling around. I'm giving up. It shows your disrespect. You're just basically saying, no, thank you, I don't want this. And it would bring shame upon you. And so it was a big deal. It was something, it was important. And so we see here that Judah says to his other son, okay, Onan, it's your turn. And Onan goes and he marries her. And it says, but Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he admitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. You can imagine Tamar going, oh, there we go. I'm taking out this whole family. First son goes, now his brother's dead. This is just scary. The thing that displeased the Lord was that Onan did not respect his brother or Tamar. He took advantage of Tamar for his own pleasures, but he would not give his brother an heir. And the Lord said, okay, boom, done. Move on to number 3. Let's go on to the next son. And it says, then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So Judah goes, okay, wait a second, slow down here. We got 2 down, 1 to go. Going to take a little breather here. A little bit of break. Yeah, I don't think he's old or mature enough. He's not as mature as his brothers. We're going to let him grow up a little bit more. And so he's kind of tells Tamar to go back and live in his father's house. Now, this is important too, because in the tradition, they would give a dowry. And that dowry would be held by the father of the bride for just such occasion. The 2 brothers die. The 2 brothers die. Now she is going back to live with her father. And he has this money in reserve that he had got for his daughter to help him take care of her because she's now back at home. It was a way to take care of her so that she wouldn't be completely destitute. And the father wouldn't be like, oh no, I can't take my daughters. Can you imagine? Well, you guys have, how many daughters do you guys have? How many? 8? Can you imagine? Well, some of them have come back home. But if they all got married and then came back home repeatedly, how you would be like, oh, we're going under here. We can't keep doing this. Like, how often are we going to do this? It was designed to protect the women and to take care of them. And so she goes home and spends time with her dad. Now, Judah here is not doing the right thing. He's deciding, you know what, I'm not going to follow tradition. I'm not going to follow the rules. I'm just going to hold off here because this isn't working out. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hira, the Adummelite. So Judah here, his wife passes away. Now, his wife's not that old, because Judah's not that old. His wife's not that old, so she dies suddenly. She's probably in her 30s or 40s, maybe a little older. And she passes away suddenly, and Judah is now single. And Judah mourns her loss, and then he goes up for the time of sheep shearing. Now, the time of sheep shearing was party time. It was time of celebration. Because this is when the money's coming in. You had two times that money was coming in, when those goats were being slaughtered for meat or when those goats were being sheared. And when you sheared, the money was coming in. And even today, in some areas where they have sheep shearing, all the farmers come into one area and these sheep shearers shear all the sheep for them. And it's kind of like they come in, they shear, they weigh out the wool, and you get paid. So it's payday. It's payday. And so he's coming to get the sheep sheared. He's mourned and he's gotten over the loss of his wife, and now he's going to shear his sheep, get some money. And it says here in verse 13, and it was told Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as wife. Tamar knows something's up. Tamar's like, Judah has not treated me right, and he can't just leave me here with my father. We sometimes look at this and say, why didn't Tamar just go off and find another nice guy and get married? Why was she just sitting there at her father's house? The reason is that now, according to tradition, according to rules, she was under the headship of Judah. Judah was the one who would call it, because she now belonged to his family. And so she can't just go off and marry whoever she wants, so she has to wait for him to give permission for her to get married again. And as far as she knows, he's forgotten about her. He's gone, you know what, I'm done with her. She's the black widow, right? We don't want to keep her around. She's killing off all my kids. I got to keep my eyes on my family. And so she looks and she says, he's not going to keep his word. She's fed up. She's fed up. She's been brought into this family. She's twice widowed. She's been sent back to her father's house, and she's like, I need to do something about this. And when we look at this, it's important for us to realize she takes things into her own hands. She takes things into her own hands. And I told you that things are just going to get worse last week. Well, here's where it gets worse. She takes things into her own hands and conceives this plan. Now, Tamar came from an ungodly Canaanite family, and she was raised in their ways. And we don't know if Tamar was raised this way, like we just know from tradition and history, that in the Canaanite practices and a lot of villages and cities, once you got to the age of 18 or 16, 17, you would go and spend a year or 6 months in service of the temple as a temple prostitute. It was part of worship. It was part of the worship and celebration. It was gross and disgusting. And so she may have already known what it was like to do this. She knew how to dress up, how to look like a harlot. She goes and she puts on the veil, she dresses up like a harlot, and she heads for the street. And she waits for her father-in-law. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, "Please let me come in to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And he said, "I will send a young goat from the flock." So she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" Then he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. See, this story gets worse. She says, "You know what? If you're not going to give me your son, I'm going to take you. I'm going to take you. And you're going to have to take care of me." Now, I just want to stop here and just realize that this, from what we read, this was not Judah's practice to go find a harlot. His wife has just died. He's going through a hard time. And he goes and he sees her and he falls big time. We always have to be on guard. Because we could say, well, I could never do that. Well, I could say, look at Judah's life and say, Judah's not the kind of guy who would do that. But here he does it. And you know what? I guarantee he never did it again. he falls big time. And he goes and he makes a pledge to her because he doesn't have any money with him because he hasn't sheared his sheep yet. So he's like, okay, well, here I'm going to make a pledge to you, so I'll give you a goat. How's that sound? We're going to talk about a good deal, eh? Hey, baby, I got a goat. What do you say? Like, I don't think that would fly today. So he offers her a goat, and she goes, okay, well, what were you going to give me now? And she goes, okay, I'll give a pledge. I'm going to give you something on hold until I get that goat. So he gives her his signet ring, which was a ring with a crest or a symbol of the family, of his name, his family. And it was used for business deals. They would put a little wax on a paper and press that ring into it, and it would make that symbol, that seal, that crest, that would seal it, saying, yes, I've made this agreement. You would also use it when you shipped things. When you sent things, if you would wrap it and bind it and seal it with wax, put that signet mark on it. This was an important thing. The signet ring was a symbol of your identity. It represented your family and who you were. And he gives her that. And then he gives her the cord or the bracelet, which was a symbol of his wealth. It'd be a nice bracelet, a fancy bracelet. And he gives her that. He's like, here, you can have that. And then he gives her his staff. The staff was his walking staff. This was important. This showed his position and power over the family. We've seen it all through Scripture. All the important guys had walking staffs. I was actually reading this week going, I need to get myself a walking staff. Be walking around with big, hey, how's it going? I think that might, police pull me over, hey. I remember years ago, here's a side story. We were watching the news, and there was this, we kind of caught it out of the corner of our eye, this news story about a guy in Edmonton walking down the street with a bazooka. And we're like, what? That's probably why we stopped and listened to the news. It said this guy was walking down the street with a bazooka. And I right away said, my friends, it was Shauna's high school friends, her husband. Now, he was really into military stuff and everything. He was never part of the military, but he loved that stuff. And they live in Edmonton, so I said, it's probably him. Just jokingly, right? So I don't remember how we contacted them, whether it was through phone. I don't think it was Facebook, because I don't think Facebook was there yet. And what we find out is it wasn't him. It was his brother. He had gone to the surplus, bought a surplus decommissioned bazooka for a collector thing, but was walking down the street with his on his shoulder. That's the part that didn't make it worse. The thing that made it worse is that he had to park a block away from the store, and he left his kids in the vehicle. And they were all little tiny kids. And so, of course, the police are up to catch him with a bazooka, and then they find his kids, and it would just turn into this huge thing, and it's just like, wow, yeah. So, but anyway, so, yeah, I don't think walking around with a staff downtown might not. Some people are like, well, excuse me, sir, what is that for? It's like, it's my staff. It shows my power and prominence. Like, yeah, you better put that away. You just look weird. But it was a symbol of his position. So Tamar asks for his person, his possessions, and his position. She says, you got to give me everything that you are. These are the things that showed who he was. She says, give them to me. And that's what the enemy wants. The enemy wants to take everything from us. Not just our possessions, but our position and our identity. He seeks to kill, steal, and destroy. In John verse 10:10 it says, the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Jesus came that we would have life more abundantly. The enemy wants nothing more than to just rip us off. He just wants to rip us off. He wants to tear everything away from us. But the Lord wants to rebuild what the enemy just tried to destroy. Always remember that when temptation comes, you go, what are you trying to steal? What are you trying to kill in my life? What are you trying to destroy? It's kind of funny when we look at this verse, because it says, except to steal and to kill and to destroy. Well, you think that, okay, they steal something, so you go steal something, okay. And then you kill that person. Well, there's not much more you can do to them. But the enemy's like, I'm going to steal, and I'm going to kill, and I'm going to destroy. How does he destroy us? because of the impact and the effect that it has upon our life and those around us. The ripple effect. He wants to destroy, reap havoc in our life. And that's why we always have to hold tight to Jesus and stay close to him. It says here, and she conceived. This was not Judah's plan. This was not his intention. But it was part of Tamar's plan. It was part of Tamar's hopes. She wanted to get the eye of Judah. So she rose, went her way, and laid aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adulamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand. But he did not find her. Notice this, that Judah doesn't go back. Judah's embarrassed. Judah's embarrassed. He's embarrassed of what he's done, but he's also embarrassed because he doesn't have his stuff that says who I am. He's embarrassed. He's given everything away. He doesn't want to look at this woman again. He's full of shame. And doesn't that happen when we fall into temptation, into sin? That shame overwhelms us? That shame hits us as we go, oh, what have I done? I know better than this. Why did I fall? And you know the trick is, don't wallow in the shame. You get up and you go, you know what? Yes, I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm going to remember this and I'm going to walk the other way. The next time that temptation comes, I'm going to say, no, thank you. I know what it brings and I don't want it. We have to always remember that that's why the Lord says, thou shalt not. Not because he's the big meanie who's saying, hey, you don't do these things. He's saying, don't do these things. I know what it brings. It's going to steal and kill and destroy you. That's why I'm saying don't do this. Because I'm trying to protect you because I love you so much. So Tamar goes, and it says here that she laid aside her veil, put on her garments, and she put on her garments of widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adulamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand. But he did not find her. Then he asked the men of the place, saying, can you imagine this? He's kind of like, thanks a lot, Judah. Guys, where's this harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. These are the guys in the community. They're like, we don't have like a community harlot. There's no harlot here. We don't do that here. And he's like, okay. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. Also the men of the place said, there was no harlot in this place. I wouldn't have wanted to been Judah's friend, Hira here. It's just like, what have you hired me to do? That's bad. It's like, I've gone, and you have to ask this uncomfortable, terrible question, trying to clean up the mess after him. And the guys are like, you know what? There's never been a harlot here. And he's like, this isn't good. So he goes back to Judah. And he says, hey, I can't find her. Slight problem here. She doesn't exist. He's like, I guess I'm not getting my stuff back. He's stuck here. And the only way to protect his armor is just to forget about the whole thing and walk away. Verse 23. Then Judah said, let her take them for her. Let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. For I have sent this young goat, and you have not found her. I love this verse here when it says here, let her take them for herself. Like, okay, fine, she can keep that stuff. You know, it's really important to me, but she can keep that stuff. Lest we be shamed. And you can see Hira going, wait, we? Like, why are you dragging me into this? I already had to go down and stand there awkwardly and go, excuse me, guys. I don't do this kind of stuff, but I was just wondering where the local harlot is that's usually here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, no problem. It wasn't me. I'm looking for a friend. You know, that doesn't work, right? A friend of mine sent me to look for the local harlot. Okay, yeah. Lest we be shamed, for I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, was playing the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Judah hears the news, and he is quick to judge. For he thought more highly of himself than Tamar. He goes, oh, bring her out, we'll burn her. We'll teach her a lesson. Oh, playing a harlot? Oh, my goodness. You know, that's the big problem with self-righteousness. It causes you to begin to look down your nose at everyone around you, and you become a sin sniffer, a judge of everyone else's actions. He doesn't go, my daughter-in-law played a harlot. I was looking for a harlot. Uh-oh. We should probably just keep everything quiet. He's like, no, she should die. This has got to be taken care of. Judah was just as guilty, if not more, than Tamar in this situation. Oftentimes when we are bothered by sin in someone else's life, it's because we struggle with the same sin in some way or another in our life. Oftentimes when we get this attitude of, oh, how dare you, oh, it's because we struggle with that sin some way. It may not be in the same way, but in some way we struggle with that sin. And we look down upon them. And that's not what the Lord wants us to do. We don't look up and say, oh, look at you, you're sitting great. And that's what the world wants us to do. Oh, we should celebrate people's sin. No, we look at them and say, you know what, you need the grace of God just as much as I need the grace of God, because we're both messed up. That's the one thing that's so awesome about the church. A bunch of messed up people get together and have a great time, being blessed together, being lifted up and strengthened, and the Lord changes us, and we move forward. I always love it when people come to the church and say, I don't know if I can be here because everybody seems to have their stuff together and I'm a real mess. And I go, oh, you know, but I look around and everybody's really got their stuff and their life in order. And I go, and they go, what are you laughing at me for? I go talk to the other people. Go share your story. And you know what they're going to say is, you think that one's bad? Just waiting to hear what we went through. Just waiting to hear about our mess. Just wait until you hear about how the Lord changed us. We've been there. And I've heard this multiple times over the years. And people say, oh, but people don't understand. And I go, no. Go talk to the other people. Go fellowship. And that's why fellowship is so important. As we talk, we begin to learn, hey, I'm not the only one. And that's why it's so important here. Judah looks down at her right away and just says, oh, she's a dirty, let's just kill her. Let's just burn her. When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff. What? You can see Judy's like, yeah, bring her out. We're going to burn her. I can't believe she'd do this to our family. What? Oh, bringing shame upon it. Oh, I can't. Killed my sons and then this. Oh, she's horrible. And then it's like, oh, those are mine. And you can just see his heart sink as he realizes, oh, this is my mess. This is my sin. This is the sin I committed. Coming back. So Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. And he never knew her again. Judah realizes his mistake. Well, many of his mistakes. And Judah now takes care of her like she should have been taken care of from the beginning. Judah now takes care of her, which is what she deserved from the very beginning. Now it came to pass at the time for giving birth, they behold, twins were in her womb. Wow, twins are really running this family. And I think I would be scared if I was in this family and someone had twins. They'd be like, uh-oh, this is not going to turn out good. This is always a mess. And so it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened as he drew back his hand that his brother came out unexpectedly. And she said, how did you break through? this breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Perez, which means breach or breakthrough. Afterwards his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. The battle between older and younger continues. Here we see this, and I have to be honest. I don't think we have any twins other than one. Do we have any cousins? Yeah, we have some cousins and twins. We don't really have that many twins in our family. But I've always thought it was weird when I had friends who were twins that they were so competitive over, like, I was born like 2 minutes before you. A minute and a half. I'm older. And they would always be like, they'd jump on each other about this. And I'd be like, dude, like, seriously. But I guess it's a big deal because it's like, you want that, I'm the oldest, all right. You're like, I'm the oldest by a quarter of a minute. Just both slid out at the same time. But there's this battle on, and Perez is born, and his name means breach or breakthrough. He broke past his brother and came out first. This family is so messed up by Judah's parents, or Judah's parents were messed up. We remember that family feud as they were having their children, as they were going back and forth. Oh yeah, I got kids, I'm going to have kids, and it was just a mess. They had issues galore. All of the things that were going on just created a huge mess in their lives. Both Judah and Tamar sinned and messed things up even more. But through it all, we can see God's hand of grace working through them. I have to admit, when I read this story, I go, God, why did you stick with these people? I think to the story of Moses when they had come across the Red Sea and the whole worshiping the golden calf incident, and God just says, you know what, maybe I'll just wipe these guys out and we'll find some. Moses, I'll just take you and we'll start again. And Moses is like, no, God, no. These are your people and they're a mess and we love them. I just don't, I would be, if I was Moses, I'd be like, yeah, you got it right, let's do this. You zap them and we'll get going. I don't want to deal with them. But you know what? I think Moses was smart enough to know that even if they did it that way, what would happen? A whole pile of new messes. But this shows the grace of God. The grace of God that says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And in this Easter season, it's important for us to remember that while we were still in our sin, He died for us. He poured out His grace upon us, even when they're in this mess. Because I go, Judah, how can you? Judah is going to become the royal line. This is the line that the Messiah is going to come through. And God's going to work through him. And I go, whoa, you could probably pick better. And the Lord says, no, I picked the right one. God's hand is working here. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram. Here we see that the Lord has used Tamar and their son to bring forth the Messiah. Why? Because God wanted to show His grace, saying, I can work through anything. When we look at our life, we say, oh, God, I don't even see how you could ever do anything. Look at all the messes I've done. Even after I've come to know you, I've messed up over and over and over again. And He says, look at the Word of God. I use messes. And I build them up and I work through them. I have a plan. Despite their mess, their sin, their tragic consequences, God's plans was still at work. He's still working. And God can work, and He will work, and He's going to move through the mess. We have to be careful because sometimes we hold on to some mess that's in our past and say, well, I can't move on because of this. But you know what? For the same reason why when people say, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable because I've had this mess in my life and nobody would understand. God's saying, hey, you know what? You got your mess in your life? Guess what? Everybody's going to understand. And I'm going to use you. And you'll be able to bless people because you've been there already. When you see them trudging through the mud of life and picking themselves up after being beat down, you can say, hey, brother, come here. Hey, sister, come on. Let me hug you. Let me lift up your burdens. Let me carry you through this. Because you know what? I've been in those trenches.